typically we would say that's unacceptable, that the test is not good enough to be able to let us know that an individual is actually infectious.
That was Dr. Larissa Matukis, head of the microbiology division at Unity Health Toronto, St. Michael's Hospital. In a recent interview with Canadian broadcaster Global News, she was discussing differences between data from a study of a COVID test kit that test supplier btnx gave to Health Canada in the fall of 2020 with the results that regulators obtained during that same period. The test results provided by btnx helped enable it to secure some $2 billion in government contracts beginning in the early spring of 2020, a time of desperate medical shortages of reliable test kits. For more on that, we speak with journalist Camila Escalante, who just returned from an assignment in Toronto. Camila, this is not the first case of something not being as advertised in and around COVID. Why don't you give us some of the details of this story?
Precisely, Don. Well, these were massively distributed rapid tests throughout Canada. They were sold to some people who, for example, wanted to buy large numbers of them for shelters, for people who have substance abuse issues or who live in, maybe it is community housing, and distributed that way, maybe to schools or to people who were having to work during the lockdown as well. But they were also distributed at local pharmacies. If somebody wanted to have them in their home, they could purchase them, but also some of them were given away for free. And people were relying on this brand of COVID tests, which they believed were being produced, manufactured in Canada by this manufacturer in Ontario, and they thought it was a reliable test. And this is, of course, during the time which people were taking all sorts of measures to ensure that they were protected or that they would stay away from work and school and other activities if there was any risk of the spread of COVID. And what they found out, of course, is that these tests actually were not as effective as they purported to be by the company. The flaw, according to this Global News investigation, said that the test kit was more likely to produce a false negative result, meaning that you were getting a lot of negative results when people actually did have COVID. And they said that this test was purchased in huge quantities to the tune of 404 million tests from this company, btnx. That was by Health Canada and the Public Health Agency of Canada. So they bought hundreds of millions of tests, which aren't faulty per se, but they were just giving a lot of negative results to everyone. So what's the point? They were basically saying, and the health authorities in Canada as well were saying, that if you want a real, result, then you need to go and carry and have a PCR test taken, where they take an actual sample of your blood or saliva or swab your nose and get that done in a clinic. You really have to go into a clinic or a hospital or one of these places or your doctor's office to get a PCR test. But basically saying that, that's what you're going to have to do anyways, even to back up the result that you get from these rapid tests. So in some sense, they were kind of worthless. And the article goes on to say that despite the company's lack of specific expertise with infectious diseases, they had no expertise in infectious diseases. This underdog became the nation's foremost rapid test supplier during the pandemic, and the federal government awarded btnx a series of 15 contracts and became the largest COVID-era supply deal. And so they're getting these massive contracts for the government. And of course, the government is always promoting this whole idea that we need to stop importing things, of course, that we need to be able to produce things. We need to be able to, support Canadian companies, domestic production. But they did so hiring this company or contracting this company, which was actually importing these tests, which were manufactured in China by a Chinese company. And this is probably a rapid COVID test that isn't even being sold or circulated within China. They probably have better tests for their citizens with higher accuracy. But this company is able to make a killing off of these companies and governments based in the West who are importing these tests in massive numbers. And so, so the government's always talking about promoting all of these, Canadian companies, and it was, by the way, the company in China was called AssureTech, and they have, contracts with other people, other companies and governments in the West as well. And it's just funny because it's just one of those things like Trump going around, saying make America great again. And those caps, the first ones, those ball caps that were being, sold were actually produced in China as well. So these governments and these politicians are propagandizing around these, let's produce things domestically and like all this, this and that about competing with China, when really they would be nothing without China. So it says that the investigation went on to say that Canadians had likely no notion that under the the laws governing medical devices, a product's importer can call itself its manufacturer, or that importing a test from abroad is a form of manufacturing. So that's absolutely incredible. So they are actually able to tell the public under the existing laws in Canada that they're the manufacturer, despite that they weren't.
Yeah. Between 2020 and 2022, the Canadian federal government spent $5 billion on rapid tests, and $2 billion of it went to this company. And that is with this flaw. So, you're talking about 40%, almost half of the rapid tests that were bought by the government, presumably circulated in Canada, were faulty, except when people were so sick that they were probably visibly sick. And this is the same federal government that was imposing all these onerous restrictions and did all that stuff to the truckers and all of that. And this, they're handing out $5 billion to people, and you've got people all over the place with COVID walking around thinking they don't have it because of these tests.
Exactly. And to pull out a quote that was put into this global news investigation, they said that Trudeau actually during COVID praised this company, btnx, as an innovative Canadian company that had moved forward with a world-class product. A Canadian company moving forward with a world-class product, which is Chinese in origin. Certainly not produced in Canada. And so then the question is, are they going to be, whether it's these same investigators from Global News or other, agencies linked to the government, are they going to be looking into graft? Are they going to be looking into corruption? It's an honest question when we look at how big of a sort of industry revolved around this whole COVID stuff in Canada. And I think that with all of the propagandizing that the government did during, during those crucial moments with, the health minister giving daily updates, other provincial sort of health ministers and authorities giving guidance on how people should proceed, amid the spread of COVID-19, people were already asking, questions. As you said, there was the convoy and that went to Ottawa, and all sorts of other, reactions to the failures to respond by this government, or in other cases, the government's overreach in terms of some of the measures that they implemented during that time. And so I think a lot of questions remain to be asked. And of course, we don't know if there's going to be some other sort of virus that is, spreading, or that they claim will be spreading. It's flu season once again, December, of course, in Canada. And so, there are a lot of questions that need to be asked. This is a government that has very low approval rating, very low support right now, criticized by the right, criticized by the left, particularly on the issues of COVID, but also particularly on the issues of Ukraine. And of course, now Palestine and Israel. People are protesting Trudeau daily at all of the events that he attends, even though there's, high levels of security and his agenda has become so secretive. But these are questions that need to be asked of him and his administration.
Camila, thank you so much for your time. This is a very interesting story, and we're going to follow it because it's not finished. So far, Trudeau's answer is, well, we have some lessons to learn, and I guess perhaps he might have a few to learn himself. We're going to find out. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Don.
For KPFK, I'm Don DeBar.